Mary had a little lamb.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Trump is a f***ing idiot. It's about 400 and something pages. Can't say I've read it all, but I've read most of it.
Holy crap. Okay, we're sorry. It's not our fault. Our brand new equipment is failing, and we were on hold for a very long time. I tried to tweet. This one is blaming that one, and that one is blaming this one. Meanwhile, we just have our fingers crossed that whatever the problem is, will be, it's somehow in the can. Can you say in the can? I don't know. That's how the day started, though, with Lindsey Graham, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate of the United States of America, saying he hasn't read the full Mueller report. Let's have a hearing. He's done. What? And I got to tell you, it was like an alternative universe. The Republicans were asking all about Hillary and Hillary's emails. All these years later, when did the email thing happen? In 2015? What is this, 4 years later? I'm surprised they didn't ask about Benghazi or Travelgate or Whitewater. I mean, this was the sickest alternative universe hearing I'd ever experienced in my life. And it's all because Bill Barr decided he was going to lie. The Senate is gone. I just want to tell you, the Senate is gone. But today, for sure, we learned that the Department of Justice, in the hands of Bill Barr, is also gone. Last night, the Washington Post broke a story. Matt Zapotowski and Devlin Barrett, they broke a story that they had heard from the Department of Justice, people inside the Department of Justice, like they're being held hostage, and they're screaming, "Help me, help me, help me." And they released a letter that Mueller wrote to Bill Barr on March 27th, saying that he had previously sent a letter dated March 25th. And that that enclosed the introduction and executive summary for each volume of the special counsel's report, marked with redactions, to remove any information that potentially could be protected by Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E, grand jury material, that concerned declination decisions or that related to a charged case. We also had marked an additional 2 sentences for review and have now confirmed that these sentences can be released publicly. Accordingly, the enclosed documents are in a form that can be released to the public, consistent with legal requirements and department policies. I am requesting that you provide these materials to Congress and authorize their public release at this time. As we stated in our meeting on March 5th and reiterated to the department early in the afternoon of March 24th, the introduction and executive summaries of our 2-volume report accurately summarize this office's work and conclusions. The summary letter the department sent to Congress and released to the public late afternoon of March 24th, so it's the same freaking day, did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of this office's work and conclusions. We communicated that concern to the department on the morning of March 25th, same day. There is now public confusion about critical aspects of the result of our investigation. This threatens to undermine a central purpose for which the department appointed the special counsel, to assure full public confidence in the outcome of investigations. While we understand that the department is reviewing the full report to determine what is appropriate for public release, a process that our office is working with you to complete, that process need not delay release of the enclosed materials. He actually enclosed the executive summaries, redacted, ready to go out to the public, ready to go to Congress. And what did Bill Barr do? Bill Barr decided he would have a press conference. At first, right? He had where he lied. He totally lied at that press conference. Remember, when we finally got the Mueller report, we learned that Mueller would have charged the president of the United States at the very minimum with obstruction of justice if the president was not the president. And the reason Mueller concluded that he couldn't is because of the OLC. Here, put up on my screen, will you, Brett? I'm just going to read to you from the Mueller report. This is it right here. It says, first, a traditional prosecution or declination decision entails a binary determination to initiate or decline a prosecution, but we determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment. The Office of Legal Counsel has issued an opinion finding that, quote, the indictment or criminal prosecution of a sitting president would impermissibly undermine the capacity of the executive branch to perform its constitutionally assigned functions in violation of the constitutional separation of powers. Given the role of the special counsel as an attorney in the Department of Justice and the framework of the special counsel regulation, this office accepted OLC's legal conclusion for the purpose of exercising prosecutorial jurisdiction. So the only reason Mueller gave, and he gave it to Bill Barr, and he gave it to the American people, the only reason he did not prosecute was because of that OLC decision. All right, shall we revisit what Bill Barr said at the first press conference he had?
Mr. Attorney General, we don't have the report in hand, so could you explain for us the special counsel's articulated reason for not reaching a decision on obstruction of justice, and if it had anything to do with the department's long-standing guidance on not indicting a sitting president? And you say you disagreed with some of his legal theories. What did you disagree with him on?
I'd leave it to his description in the report, the special counsel's own articulation of why he did not want to make a determination as to whether or not there was an obstruction offense. But I will say that when we met with him, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein and I met with him along with Ed O'Callahan, who is the principal associate deputy. On March 5th, we specifically asked him about the OLC opinion and whether or not he was taking the position that he would have found a crime but for the existence of the OLC opinion. And he made it very clear several times that that was not his position. He was not saying that but for the OLC opinion he would have found a crime. He made it clear that he had not made the determination that there was a crime.
That's a lie. That is a lie, and that is how Bill Barr introduced himself to the people of the United States of America as Donald Trump's personal attorney and not the Attorney General of the United States, because I just showed you the Mueller report. And in the Mueller report, it clearly says that Mueller did not make the binary decision of prosecute or decline to prosecute because of the OLC opinion. So that was the first thing. And I remember the day that happened when Bill Barr stood there and lied like that, calling it a lie. I remember saying that to you. And now it's absolutely clear that he intended to lie, that he continues to lie, that Mueller knows he's lying, that Mueller, remember when Mueller's, some people on the Mueller team told the New York Times that they were very frustrated with the characterization that Bill Barr and the 4-page memo, it did not, right? And then Mueller follows up and he apparently also writes to Bill Barr and he says to him that it didn't capture the context, the nature, or the substance of the Office of Special Counsel's work. And I'm telling you, last night, people were shocked, especially lawyers, because they understood very, very clearly that no one would write a letter like that. No one would go to paper, as they say, as an attorney, let alone a prosecutor, and write to the Attorney General of the United States that you lied and misrepresented our findings, our conclusions. You didn't, the critical aspects of the results of our investigation were absolutely false, what you said to the American people. No one would do that unless the Attorney General had to resign.
Jeff, I mean, the Mueller letter, it certainly indicates and echoes what you and others have been saying before the full report was released, that Barr was clearly trying to shape the narrative, and it very obviously had alternatives and ignored them.
And distorted the meaning of the report. I mean, I just don't think there is any doubt now that we have read the vast majority of
Except
it,
for Lindsey
that
Graham.
Mueller was right, that Barr put out a misleading summary designed to spin it in a much more pro-Trump direction, shape the public perception of the Mueller report forever, because 4 weeks there was no alternative view out there. And what we didn't know until today is that Mueller was pissed. Mueller was, saw what was going on here and was powerless to do anything about it.
Okay, so that was last night. All right, let's fast forward into today. Today, Bill Barr shows up at the Senate Judiciary Committee, where Lindsey Graham is the chairman. I mean, I was just sick. And Lindsey Graham does this whole dog and pony show prior to Bill Barr's testimony about Hillary Clinton. No kidding. About Hillary's emails and about Strzok and Page and their text messages. And, he actually says this out loud in the Senate.
Trump is a f***ing idiot.
Quoting. Okay, Strzok. And now everybody's going, how do I get that as my ringtone?
Trump is a f***ing idiot.
Oh, that's the best soundbite ever, right? So he's saying that it was all about Lisa Page and Strzok. The whole Mueller investigation was about Lisa Page and Strzok. I mean, this is so sick. And they proceed to talk about spying, and they proceed to talk about Hillary's emails and BleachBit and acid washing. And, I mean, just like crazy, crazy stuff. With Bill Barr sitting right there, there to testify about the Mueller report. And it was just, it was the sickest thing. And finally, Chris Coons, we go through, Sheldon Whitehouse is just sitting there. I mean, every Democrat is like, oh my God, you have to resign. Oh my God, you're sitting here lying to our face. Oh my God, this is worse than we thought. I mean, Mazie Hirono actually, told him, this, you lied. We got you, And
Mr. Barr, now the American people know that you are no different from Rudy Giuliani or Kellyanne Conway or any of the other people who sacrificed their once decent reputation for the grifter and liar who sits in the Oval Office. Huh. You once turned down a job offer from Donald Trump to represent him as his private attorney. At your confirmation hearing, you told Senator Feinstein that, quote, the job of Attorney General is not the same as representing, end quote, the president. So you know the difference, but you've chosen to be the president's lawyer and side with him over the interests of the American people. You lied to Congress.
Yeah.
You told Representative Charlie Crist that you didn't know what objections Mueller's team might have to your March 24th so-called summary. You told Senator Chris Van Hollen that you didn't know if Bob Mueller supported your conclusions, but you knew. You lied. And now we know. A lot of respected nonpartisan legal experts and elected officials were surprised by your efforts to protect the president. But I wasn't surprised. You did exactly what I thought you'd do. It's why I voted against your confirmation. I expected you would try to protect the president, and indeed you did. From the beginning, you were addressing an audience of one.
Yep.
That person being Donald Trump. That's why, before the bombshell news of yesterday evening, 11 of my Senate colleagues and I called on the Department of Justice Inspector General and Office of Professional Responsibility to investigate the way you have handled the Mueller report. I wanted them to determine whether your actions complied with the department's policies and practices and whether you have demonstrated sufficient impartiality to continue to oversee the 14 other criminal matters that the special counsel referred to in other parts of the Department of Justice. But now, we know more about your deep involvement in trying to cover up for Donald Trump. Being Attorney General of the United States is a sacred trust. You have betrayed that trust. America deserves better. You should resign.
Wow. And now, just about every Democrat today is screaming. He's got to resign. This man has got to go. And if he won't go, we have to impeach him. Why? Because the Department of Justice is gone if Bill Barr is our Attorney General. Bill Barr is a liar. Bill Barr is an obfuscator. Bill Barr sat there and defended the president taking foreign help. He sat there and said that Don McGahn was a liar. He sat there and complained, Bob Mueller, he was like a P word, pretty much, he called him, because he wouldn't prosecute. He wouldn't prosecute. And I swear to God, I don't know why Mueller just whiffed, and I don't know why he didn't prosecute. And obviously, the reason why Mueller said he didn't prosecute is because of the rule of the OLC, and Mueller felt that he was an employee of the Justice Department and that he couldn't violate the rules of the Justice Department, and he laid that out in his report. Bill Barr pretends that that's not even in the report. He pretends he doesn't know why Mueller didn't indict the president if the president is guilty. This was the most bizarre. He actually kept saying the president was right to try to fire Mueller. The president was right to try and get somebody to fire Mueller because the president thought he was innocent. You know what? I've been sued so many times. I always knew I was innocent. Doesn't mean I don't testify. Doesn't mean I can just fire the lawyer that's suing me.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Trump is a f***ing idiot.
According to Special Counsel Mueller's report, in June of 2017, President Trump called White House counsel McGahn and directed him to have the special counsel removed. And I quote, this is from about page 85, 86. McGahn recalled the president called him at home twice, and on both occasions directed him to call Rosenstein and say that Mueller had conflicts and could no longer serve as special counsel. There were no credible conflicts. McGahn testified that he had shared that these conflicts were silly, were not real, and Chris Christie advised President Trump about the same time there were no substantive bases, no good cause to fire the special counsel. In one call, the president said, call Rod, tell Rod Mueller has conflicts, can't be the special counsel, quote, Mueller has to go. And I assume he didn't mean go to Cleveland or go to Seattle. He meant go, be fired. Call me back when you do it. I think the president's demands to fire Mueller without cause are alarming and unacceptable. And Mr. Attorney General, not one bit of what I just described was in your March 24th letter to this committee, was it?
No.
But
I wasn't
But it
speaking.
was in the summaries that were offered to you by Special Counsel Mueller and his team, which you chose not to release. Is that correct?
They were in complete form in the final report, which I was striving to make public. And
Can I just interrupt for a brief moment? Because Chris Coons does a masterful job, as does almost every Democrat on the Judiciary Committee in the Senate today. However, I have to just interrupt briefly because what Mueller wrote in this letter that we found out he wrote last night, because there was great reporting at the Washington Post. The New York Times confirmed it hours later. This morning, the letter was released by somebody at the Department of Justice. And what was in that letter were not just Mueller saying you totally misrepresented everything we found, all of our work, the reason why we didn't prosecute Trump, the OLC decision. You misrepresented everything. You've been lying ever since you stood up at a podium. You sent 3 letters. All 3 of them were, disinformation. You're acting like you're the attorney for this man instead of the attorney for the United States of America, and I won't have it, right? Not only did he send that letter, but there were enclosures with that letter. You know what Mueller enclosed with that letter? He enclosed the redacted, ready-to-go summaries. And remember how we kept saying to you that executive summaries are always in every report, because it's the basic rule of communication. And I explained it to you. It's tell them what you're going to tell them. tell him, and then tell him what you told him. That's how reports are. And if you've ever written a report, you know that the very first thing you do is an executive summary, where you're going to tell people who are about to read this report what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them, and then at the end, you tell them what you told them. What Bill Barr did is if Mueller wrote a book, and the publisher, Bill Barr, decided to write a foreword. And the foreword said, the book is not about what you think it's about. I'm going to lie to you about what this book is about, and it's pointless to read this book. That's what Bill Barr did, and everyone knows it.
Which I did make public.
Which I respect and appreciate. But a critical 3 weeks passed between when you delivered the letter with the focus on the principal conclusions and when we ultimately got the redacted report. And what I take from the Mueller letter to you...
Why were they critical?
Well, I think that the Volume 2 summary would have revealed to the general public a whole range of inappropriate actions by the president and his core team. I'll go to a second episode that I think is important. On February 5th of 2018, over a week after the story broke publicly that the president ordered his White House counsel to fire the special counsel investigating the president demanded that McGahn create a false record, saying the president never directed McGahn to fire the special counsel. The president wasn't looking for a press statement here. He wasn't looking to correct the record. He wanted a fraudulent record for White House records, a letter that wasn't true. McGahn refused to do it.
Right.
Again, there's nothing about the president's request to create a false record in your March 24th letter, is there?
Well, that's your characterization of it, and I've been through it a couple of times, and I think it would be difficult for the government to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt.
And an important point here is
there are very plausible alternative explanations.
There is no plausible alternative explanation for creating a false record.
What I was trying to get out was the final report and have one issuance of the complete report. I made it clear in the March 24th letter that Bob Mueller didn't make a decision, but that he felt he could not exonerate the president.
That's right.
I wasn't hiding the ball on where Mueller was, and that he was presenting both sides of the issue, all the evidence, but he was not making a call, but he felt he couldn't exonerate the president. And then I briefly described the process we went through to make a judgment internal into the Department of Justice. And as I say, from the public interest standpoint, I felt there should be only one thing issued, and it should be the complete report, as complete as it could be.
And I know we differ in our conclusions about what that meant, but my concern is that that gave President Trump and his folks more than 3 weeks of an open field to say, I was completely exonerated. When had you released the summaries
which
of
Mueller
the
asked
first
you
and
to
second
do.
volume, we would have been more motivated than ever, based on the first volume, to work cooperatively to protect our next election, and more concerned than ever about misdeeds, about inappropriate actions by the president and by some of his core team as a result of the summary of the second volume. And at the end of the day, you've had a number of exchanges with colleagues where you've said, I can't tell you why Mueller chose not to charge. I want to hear that from Bob Mueller. I think we should hear from Special Counsel Mueller.
We have heard from Special Counsel Mueller. This is the only thing I take issue with Chris Coons, who did a very masterful job of exposing the lying of Bill Barr with regard to, the fact that he gave 3 weeks to have all of the internet trolls, to have Donald Trump tweeting like crazy. I was exonerated. No collusion, no obstruction. I was exonerated, completely exonerated, when clearly, 3 weeks later, when Bill Barr drops the Mueller report, the redacted Mueller report, you can see for yourself that the only reason why Donald Trump was not charged with any crime is because of the OLC's decision. And Mueller started his report with it and ended his report with it, and actually says that when the president leaves office, he will no longer be protected by this OLC rule. And he will be criminally tried. And that's why Mueller says he endeavored to create such a thorough report. he'd said he was preserving the evidence when the memories were fresh, when the documents were available for a post-presidential trial. That's what Mueller says in the Mueller report. But you'd never know that because Bill Barr wrote this forward. And that was the only thing out there for 3 weeks. That said, nothing to see here. Move along. This book is not about what you think it's about. And by the way, you don't need to read it. It's all a lie. I mean, this is sick. It was really... Now, Dianne Feinstein, she actually... What? Oh, no, don't. No. I was going to say, Dianne Feinstein, she actually identified, many instances of obstruction, laid them out for Bill Barr. And I swear to you, Bill Barr, his defense of Donald Trump ended up being, after about 10 minutes of questioning, his defense ended up being, well, the president was angry and frustrated because he was innocent. He only, was looking forward to getting help from the Russians. Yes, Mueller said he would benefit from help from the Russians, but that doesn't mean he should be investigated for that. And he was frustrated and didn't want to be investigated for that. And so he had every right to ask for the special counsel to be fired. That, my friends, is obstruction of justice. Just because you're innocent doesn't mean you get to fire the judge or the jury.
Clear for takeoff. The Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandiRhodes.com. All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
But you still have a situation where a president essentially tries to change the lawyer's account in order to prevent further criticism of himself.
Well, that's not a crime.
What? It's stunning. Just right there, okay? She says, you have a president who tried to change a lawyer's account. Now, this is going back to Don McGahn putting Trump asked Don McGahn to put a fake letter into the file that would have Don McGahn saying that the president never asked him to fire Mueller. And the reason why Trump wanted that is because it was in the Washington Post on June 14th, 2017. See, all of the press got it right. So, on the evening of June 14, 2017, the Washington Post publishes an article. And the article says that the special counsel is now investigating whether or not the president tried to obstruct justice by calling Don McGahn repeatedly and asking Don McGahn to fire Mueller. And also whether or not he was bugging Rod Rosenstein to fire Mueller. And also whether or not he asked Corey Lewandowski to fire Mueller. And when Donald Trump read that in the paper, he called Don McGahn and asked Don McGahn to make a fake letter over his signature saying that he was never asked to let Mueller go, to get rid of Mueller, that Mueller's conflicted, he's got to go, okay? And she says to him, so you still have a situation where the president is asking his lawyer to change the record because he's trying to save his own ego. And Bill Barr actually answers her, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee in the U.S. Senate, and says that's not a crime. To falsify a record of obstruction is obstruction of the obstruction. It's obstruction on top of obstruction. Oh, my God. Listen to that again. This is just so sick.
You still have a situation where a president essentially tries to change the lawyer's account in order to prevent further criticism of himself.
Well, that's not a crime.
Yeah, it is.
So you can, in this situation, instruct someone to lie?
No, it has to be, well, to be obstruction of justice, the lie has to be tied to impairing the evidence in a particular proceeding. McGahn had already given his evidence, and I think it would be plausible that the purpose of McGahn memorializing what the president was asking was to make the record that the president never directed him to fire. And there is a distinction between saying to someone, go fire him, go fire Mueller, and saying, have him removed based on conflict.
And what would
they have different results?
What would that conflict be?
Well, the difference between them is if you remove someone for a conflict of interest, then there would be presumably another person appointed.
Yeah, but wouldn't you have to have it in this kind of situation, an identifiable conflict that made sense, or else doesn't it just become a fabrication?
Right.
Well, now we're going to shift from the issue of writing the memo or somehow putting out a release later on, and the issue of the actual direction to McGahn.
That makes no sense to anybody. And you don't have to be an attorney to understand that what he said there makes no sense to anybody. That in the Mueller report, it says on Saturday, June 17, 2017, the president called Don McGahn and directed him to have the special counsel removed. McGahn was at home and the president was at Camp David. This is the Mueller report. In interviews with this office, McGahn recalled that the president called him at home twice, and on both occasions directed him to call Rod Rosenstein and say that Mueller had conflicts that precluded him from serving as special counsel. On the first call, McGahn recalled that the president said something like, quote, "You gotta do this. You gotta call Rod." McGahn said he told the president that he would see what he could do. McGahn was perturbed by the call and did not intend to act on the request. He and other advisors believed the asserted conflicts were silly and not real, and they had previously communicated this view to the president. McGahn also made clear to the president that the White House counsel's office should not be involved in any effort to press the issue of conflicts. McGahn was concerned about having any role in asking the acting attorney general, Rod Rosenstein, to fire the special counsel because he had grown up in the Reagan era and wanted to be more like Judge Robert Bork and not Saturday Night Massacre Bork. McGahn considered the president's request to be an inflection point, and he wanted to hit the brakes. When the president called McGahn a second time to follow up on the order to call the Department of Justice, McGahn recalled that the president was more direct, saying, call Rod, tell Rod that Mueller has conflicts and can't be the special counsel. McGahn recalled the president telling him, quote, Mueller has to go. Call me back when you do it. McGahn understood the president to be saying that the special counsel had to be removed by Rod Rosenstein. To end the conversation with the president, McGahn left the president with the impression that McGahn would call Rosenstein. McGahn recalled that he had already said no to the president's request and was worn down, so he just wanted to get off the phone. McGahn recalled feeling trapped because he did not plan to follow the president's directive, but did not know what he would say the next time the president called. McGahn decided he had to resign. He called his personal lawyer. He called his chief of staff, Annie Donaldson, to inform her of his decision to resign. Donaldson recalled that McGahn told her the president had called and demanded he contact the Department of Justice and that the president wanted him to do something that McGahn did not want to do. McGahn told Donaldson that the president had called at least twice and in one of the calls asked, have you done it? Bill Barr says, That's not obstruction of justice. And he never used the word fire. He just said, gotta go, get rid of, can't serve as, precludes him from being the special counsel. Keeps calling people, fire him, calls Don McGahn, calls Rod Rosenstein. Finally, he calls an outsider, an American citizen who is not in the Trump administration at all. He calls Corey Lewandowski to do it. That is sick, that is twisted, and Bill Barr has to resign. He is downplaying this obstruction of justice. What Mueller said in Mueller's report is that the lies to Congress and to him, the obstruction, materially affected his investigation.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Wouldn't you have to have it in this kind of situation, an identifiable conflict that made sense, or else doesn't it just become a fabrication?
Well, now we're going to shift from the issue of writing the memo or somehow putting out a release later on, and the issue of the actual direction to McGahn. So the question on the direction to McGahn has a number of different levels to it.
No, it doesn't.
And first, as a matter of law, I think the department's position would be that the president can direct the termination or the replacement of a special counsel.
For cause.
And as a matter of law, the obstruction statute does not reach that conduct. Putting that aside, the next question would be, even if it reached the conduct, could you here establish corrupt intent beyond a reasonable doubt? What makes this case very interesting is that when you take away the fact that there were no underlying criminal conduct, and you take away the fact that there was no inherently malign obstructive act, that is, the president was carrying out his constitutional duties. What? The question is, what is the impact of taking away the underlying crime? It's not, as the report suggests, that one impact is, well, we have to find some other reason why the president would obstruct the investigation. But there's another impact, which is, if the president is being falsely accused, which the evidence now suggests that the accusations against him were false.
No, it doesn't.
And he knew they were false, and he felt that this investigation was unfair, propelled by his political opponents, and was hampering his ability to govern. That is not a corrupt motive for replacing an independent counsel. So that's another reason that we would say that the government would have difficulty proving this beyond a reasonable doubt.
That is so sick and sad. I can't even stand it. I mean, obviously, the president, if you were being investigated and you didn't do the thing that you were being investigated for, you don't have the right to fire the investigator, okay? And the president does not have the right to fire a special counsel because he believes that taking dirt from Russia and writing fake letters to cover his son's meeting with Russians that were sent by the Russian government somehow isn't illegal. That's kind of what happened here. And, that's what Mueller was saying in this letter. He's saying, really?
Well, the letter speaks for itself.
It does. And in fact, in response to your question, why not just pick up the phone? This letter was an extraordinary act. A career prosecutor rebuking the Attorney General of the United States, memorializing in writing, right? I know of no other instance of that happening. Do you?
Well, I don't consider Bob at this stage a career prosecutor. He's had a career as a prosecutor.
Well, he's a very eminent
prosecutor. He was the head of the FBI for 12 years.
He's a career
He's had a
law enforcement
career, yeah.
professional.
Right.
Yep.
I know of no other instance of.
But he was also political appointee, and he was a political appointee with me at the Department of Justice. The letter's a bit snitty, and I think it was probably written by one of his staff people.
Did you make a memorandum of your conversation?
Huh?
Did you make a memorandum?
No, I didn't.
Or did anyone else?
What?
Did anyone, either you or anyone on your staff, memorialize your conversation with Robert Mueller?
Yes.
Who did that?
There were notes taken of the call.
Oh, my God. So now they want the notes taken. First he says, no, I didn't make any notes. Then he realizes they must know that there are notes because everybody makes notes of every conversation that they have with regard to an investigation into the President of the United States. As you now know, Comey did it. McGahn did it. Everybody does it. And, of course, Rod did it. And Bill Barr did it. And Bill Barr's staff did it. And Don McGahn's staff did it. Everybody. Because when you talk on the phone like that, you're not alone on the phone, and somebody is always making notes of the conversation, unless you're Donald Trump talking to Putin and then there's nobody else on the phone and no one to make any notes, or you're talking to Putin in Helsinki and there's no one there, or you've got the Secretary of State essentially for Russia, you've got Sergei Lavrov, and you got Sergei Kislyak in the Oval Office, and you're bragging about how you fired Comey. Then the only person in the room is a Russian photographer. Right? And there are no notes. But here in America, everyone makes notes. So now Bill Barr just said there are notes of that conversation with Mueller. And he won't turn them over. He doesn't want to give them up. He's not going to provide them. I mean, this was just some sick stuff. This was really weird. I have to tell you, and if you want to know, like every time they would go to, from a Democrat, they go to a Republican, and then from a Republican, they go to a Democrat for questions, right, to question Bill Barr. Every time the Democrats would get done with their 5 minutes and a Republican would get their 5 minutes, they'd start talking about Hillary. That's what I mean. It was like an alternative universe.
Have you already task any staff to look into whether spying by the FBI and other agencies on the Trump campaign was properly predicated? And can Congress expect a formal report on your findings?
Yes, I do have people in the department helping me review the activities over the summer of 2016.
Okay. I suppose it depends on what conclusions you come to, but is there any reason why Congress wouldn't be briefed on your conclusions?
It's a little early for me to commit completely, but I envision some kind of reporting at the end of this.
That is so sick. It was so sick. I mean, honest to God. And it went on and on and on like that on the Republican side. It was all about Hillary and Hillary Clinton's emails. And, this report exonerated Donald Trump. Let's really look at Hillary now. Let's go back to Hillary. Let's look at what Hillary did. And the Steele dossier, which was not mentioned in the Mueller report. I mean, it's just so unbelievable.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, General Barr. I've been listening carefully to my Republican colleagues on the other side, and it appears that they are going to work together and coordinate the so-called lock-her-up defense. This is really not supposed to be about the Mueller investigation, the Russian involvement in the election, the Trump campaign, and so forth. It is really about Hillary Clinton's emails. Right. Finally, we get down to the bottom line. Hillary Clinton's emails and questions have to be asked about Benghazi along the way. What about Travelgate, Whitewater? There's a lot of material we should be going through today according to their response to this. That is totally unresponsive to the reality of what the American people want to know. They paid a lot of money, $25 million for this report. I respect Mr. Mueller and believe he came up with a sound report, though I don't agree with all of it. But I find, General Barr, that some of the things that you've engaged in really leave me wondering what you believe your role as Attorney General is when it comes to something like this.
You know what the real conclusion to that sentence could have been, and I love Dick Durbin, okay, from Illinois, Senator. Should have been, the real question is, Bill Barr, what side are you on? The Americans or the Russians?
Oh!
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
March 27th letter, which you received and read March 28th, the Mueller letter?
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yes.
When did you have the conversation with Bob Mueller about that letter that you've referenced?
I think it was on the 28th.
Same day that you read it? When did you first learn of the New York Times and Washington Post stories that would make the existence of this letter public, the ones that came out last night?
I think it could have been yesterday, but I'm not sure.
When they contacted you to ask for any comment?
They didn't contact me.
Contacted DOJ to ask for any comment?
I can't actually remember how it came up, but someone mentioned it.
Someone mentioned it.
At some point you knew that the Mueller letter was going to become public, and that was probably yesterday?
I think so.
Okay. When did you decide to make that letter available to us in Congress?
This morning.
Would you concede that you had an opportunity to make this letter public on April 4th when Representative Christ asked you a very related question?
I don't know what you mean by related question. It seems to me to be a very different question.
What?
I can't even follow that down the road. Boy, that's some masterful hair splitting.
Meaning you're freaking dissembling. You're lying. Here's what he's talking about. Now, first of all, remember, this is very smart questioning by Sheldon Whitehouse, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island, okay? This is the letter that Mueller sent right here. This is it. The letter where he's informing Bill Barr that he's lying to the American people about the findings that Mueller reached, right? And he sends it to Mueller. He sends it to Bill Barr on March 27th. On March 28th, Bill Barr just testifies right there that he actually called Bob Mueller to talk about this. On April 4th, Bill Barr goes to Congress and testifies, and our former governor, and I even played this back then because I thought it was something, our former governor, Charlie Crist, asks Bill Barr whether or not, this is, Mueller agrees, whether or not Mueller agrees with his conclusions on Mueller's own report. So the letter is sent on the 27th of March. Now, first of all, Bill Barr could have, on March 27th, he could have released the executive summaries that Bob Mueller in this letter is asking him to release and tells him it's all been redacted. Everything is perfectly fit for public consumption. Please release the executive summaries from Volume 1 and 2. Bill Barr chooses not to, and instead starts telling everybody that he's exonerated the president. There's no obstruction. There's no collusion. Collusion is not a legal term, obviously. But he's then asked on April 4th if Mueller agrees with what he's saying publicly.
Reports have emerged recently, General, that members of the special counsel's team are frustrated at some level with the limited information included in your March 24th letter, that it does not adequately or accurately necessarily portray the report's findings. Do you know what they're referencing with that?
No, I don't.
He's lying. He knew exactly what they were referencing because that was also in the paper. It was in the paper that some of the people on Mueller's team were very upset with the way Bill Barr was characterizing their work. And they had already written a letter to Bill Barr on the 27th of March. On the 28th of March, Bill Barr gets on the phone, talks to Mueller. Mueller tells him, I would really prefer if you just release the summaries I enclosed with my letter that I sent you yesterday. They're completely redacted. They're suitable and publishable for the public's consumption. That's what, I think you're mischaracterizing our work. I think you are mischaracterizing the context. I think you're mischaracterizing our findings. I wish you would just release these executive summaries, which we were all saying he should do. Just as a matter of common sense, but Bill Barr chose not to. And then some people on Mueller's team talked to the newspaper. And we were all saying how rare that is, how they've never leaked, how they've never talked to the press, how they've never nothing, right? And a few days later, April 4th, Bill Barr testifies at the House. And Charlie Crist, who's a congressman, asks him about this report in the newspaper that Mueller's team is upset with your characterization. Do you know what they're talking about? And he says no, because he's lying. He is lying.
I cannot imagine that you received that letter on March 24th and could not answer Congressman Crist directly when he asked you whether there were concerns about representations being made on these findings by the people working for Bob Mueller. You said, no, I don't know, after you received this letter. What am I missing?
Yeah.
Well, as I explained to Senator Leahy, I talked directly to Bob, and Bob told me that he did not have objections to the accuracy.
Attorneys don't put things in writing unless they're pretty serious about them.
Really?
There's an old rule in politics: a good politician doesn't write a letter and doesn't throw one away.
Okay.
So I've got to ask you, if he puts it in writing of his concerns or your representations on March 24th, you couldn't recall that when Congressman Crist asked you that question a few days later?
No, I'm saying that this was the March 24th letter stated that Bob Mueller did not reach a conclusion on obstruction.
It did.
And it had the language in there about not exonerating the president.
Right.
My view of events was that there was a lot of criticism of the special counsel for the ensuing few days. And on Thursday, I got this letter. And when I talked to the special counsel about the letter,
yeah,
my understanding was his concern was not the accuracy of the statement of the findings in my letter, but that he wanted more out there to provide additional context to explain his reasoning on why he didn't reach a decision on obstruction.
I'll just say this, Mr. Barr. If you received a letter from Bob Mueller a few days after your March 24th letter, it was clear he had some genuine concerns about what you had said and done to that point.
Yes, because what he had said and done to that point was he said that now remember, Bill Barr is characterizing the conversation he had with Bob Mueller, but Bill Barr is a liar. And we know this because when Bill Barr first stood up and addressed us about Mueller's findings, he said that he had specifically talked to Robert Mueller about whether or not the OLC rule about indicting a sitting president played a part in why Bob Mueller did not charge the president. Bob Mueller clearly, in the Mueller report, says the OLC rule precluded him, kept him from indicting a sitting president. However, here's the case, right? And concludes with the same thing. And the final words of the Mueller report is because no person is above the law, right? And when Bill Barr stood up, he said that he had had a personal conversation with Bob Mueller, and Bob Mueller never indicated to him that the OLC rule had any bearing on whether or not Bob Mueller made the binary decision to charge or not to charge the president. So that's a lie. So what's important is that Bill Barr has been mischaracterizing conversations that he's had with Bob Mueller under oath repeatedly. That's why I say to you, the DOJ is gone. We know the Senate is gone. We know that. We know Mitch McConnell says he's the Grim Reaper. No Democratic proposal for any damn thing ever. No Democratic desire for hearings or confirmations or testimony will ever be honored. Okay, none. He said, just think of me as the Grim Reaper, right? So we know the Senate is gone. We know Lindsey Graham will lie for the president. We know that he will, deflect and try to make this hearing on the Republican side about Hillary Clinton's emails. And now we know for sure that the Department of Justice is gone. It's gone. We don't have, let alone equal justice under law, which we haven't had pretty much ever. But we try to improve. We try to get better. We try to do sentencing reform and prison reform and everything to make it more equal under the law. Bob Barr is destroying any concept that we have a functioning Justice Department. We don't. We don't have a functioning president. We don't have a functioning presidency. It's destroyed. The presidency is destroyed. The Senate is destroyed. And now, for sure, today we found out that the Department of Justice is destroyed. We're in serious trouble. I told you Bill Barr was supposed to testify tomorrow in front of the House, and he's called it off. He has just said he does not believe that he will be appearing tomorrow, a scheduled appearance. He just doesn't think he can, appear. He doesn't like the rules. He doesn't like the format. He's not down with it. He doesn't want to talk. He said all he has to say. The Department of Justice is effectively destroyed. All we have left is one house, the House of Representatives. That's it.